Hello, my name is Yumiko Sakamoto, and today I'll be introducing my implementation of a mechanic made by one of my peers into this tile-based puzzle game. This mechanic consists of color-based barriers and paint tiles, and was originally designed by Jonathan Caparelli. First, I'll demonstrate how these mechanics affect gameplay before we delve into how they actually work in the blueprint logic. So here we have a basic level that utilizes last week's driver mechanic, the gate and switch that I developed. It's pretty simple, just push a box onto the switch and the gate will open. However, this next level introduces the first part of this week's mechanic, the painter tile and the color barrier. As you can see, the switch is now a specific color, and pushing a box that doesn't match that color will not open the corresponding gate. Therefore, we have to push a box onto this painter tile to turn it pink, and then push it over to the switch to open it. The next obstacle is the color barrier, where if the entity attempting to enter the barrier is of an incorrect color, then it cannot enter. We can see this as I try to enter the barrier while I am still pink. It won't let me in. So now let's paint ourselves and this block green. Try again. There we go. And now we can push it onto this green switch over here to open the gate, and voila. Now we can get to our final level and the last part of our new mechanic, the anti-color barriers. These barriers allow entry for entities of every color except for the one depicted, as we can see that the barrier has that white X across the purple body, indicating that every color except for purple is allowed. Now we need to utilize both the gate and switch mechanics and the color changing mechanic in order to complete the level as we adjust the color of the blocks and of ourselves. And now that we've demonstrated how the mechanic works in game, let's take a look at how it functions behind the scenes. To begin, we added an additional variable to the parent tile and entity interactable blueprints, as well as the player blueprint called color, as you can see down here. This linear color structure variable can store a color, something that we will utilize with these blueprints' children later on. Starting with the most basic change between last week and this week is the gate and switch mechanic. Originally, the gates and switches were associated with each other and with their respective color box via setting instance editable variables, as you can see down here. While the switches and gates are still associated with each other, as you can see in this variable, the association to a specific box is gone, as we instead check the color of an entering box against the color required, rather than requiring a specific box to enter the switch's space. We can see this in the code here, where after checking if the entering entity is an interactable box, and then checking to see if the switch requires a matching color box, we then look at the color of the entering entity and compare it to the color of the switch. And if it's true, then we call the gate state change and allow the player to enter the gate tile. Next up is the color painter tile, which changes the color of the player and any interactable entities that enter it. When something enters the color painter tile, we check if the entering entity is the player. And if so, we update the player's color to the color of the painter tile, as well as play a sound effect. If the entering entity is not the player, then we check if the entity has a color box, and if so, we update the color of the box to the color of the painter tile, then play a sound effect. Pretty simple. Finally, we have the color barrier tile, whose related code is not actually in the tile itself, but rather in the entity blueprint, in the function called moveTile. Originally, this function just confirms whether the destination tile is valid, and then starts the movement process. With the way I altered it, the first thing that this event does now is confirm whether the destination tile is a color barrier or an anti-color barrier. If the destination is a color barrier, it checks the color of the entity against the color of the barrier. If the colors match, the entity is allowed to enter, the sound is played, and we move down to the rest of the movement process. If the colors don't match, a sound is played to give the player audio feedback that this action is invalid, followed by a message telling them that they're the wrong color. The check that follows if the destination is not a color barrier, it then checks to see if this tile is an anti-color barrier. That if it is, then the functionality of the color barrier is reversed. If the color matches, don't let them in. But if it doesn't match, then continue moving. And that's that. Thank you for watching, and I hope this implementation of this mechanic sparks interest and/or inspiration.